So welcome back to the Revit project tutorials. This is the third tutorial in this set, and in this set we will briefly run through basic rendering. So we're not going to create very advanced rendering, just want to show you how you can create a simple rendered view for submission, and if you'd like to put onto your sheets as well. Now the first thing you need to do before you render is to set up your 3D view. And you can always use the default 3D view once it shows. There we go. But that's not always the best view, primarily because it looks at your building at a distance and almost objectifies it, so it looks like it's just an object. It's best to create a view on the street or at ground level where you can really visualize the design properly. Now before you go ahead and render, you might want to create some context as well, so you might want to put some neighboring buildings so it doesn't look so bare, some trees along the street perhaps, and in the site as well. Now trees are available in the components, or you can always load your own trees from the family libraries. I'm not going to do it for the moment. I'm just going to show you the rendering process, but I strongly suggest you do that before you start rendering so that your render actually looks good. Okay, so let's presume you have all that done. Let's set up a view first so that we're not looking at the building from a distance, and you can do that in a plan view if you like. I like to do it in a plan view so I can manipulate the camera. Now we mentioned this before, so you should know the tool for that. It's under the View tab and it's in the 3D tool, but click on the arrow and you'll see the camera option. Basically a camera will set up a perspective depending on where you place the camera, of course. Click on the camera tool and I'm just going to put the camera way out here. Now you won't be able to see it, but that's okay. Revit will still register the click. So you click to register the camera and then you pull to register the target. I'll show you inside here so you know what it looks like. So this is what it looks like, the camera. Click and click for the target. Okay, I'm just going to do it again out here. And the target is basically where you want to look. I'm going to look past that building towards a neighboring building. Now once you click on the target, it will give you a view immediately. Now from here you can manipulate the camera, so maybe you're too far away, you may need to bring the camera forward a little bit. If you're too close, you may need to bring it back a bit. So let's go back into the ground floor plan. Now notice my camera disappears as soon as I go into the ground floor plan. Before I go and turn it on, I'm just going to actually extend this crop region so I can see the extent of that camera. Okay, now once you create a 3D view, you'll list it in the 3D view here in the browser. Oops, there it is, 3D view. Now it's probably best to rename this straight away so you know what it is. So here's my street view. Now if you right click on that street view and click on show camera, it'll show the camera in the floor plan. So you need to go to the floor plan first and then right click on the 3D view. And at this point you can manipulate the camera, so you can move it back further. You can move the target closer. You can also move the field of vision closer too, so we're not seeing as much. So it's up to you. I'm going to move the camera forward a little bit, move it over there a bit, maybe target towards the building a bit. Okay, like so. Okay, so once you've got what you want, go back into the street view, double click it and you'll see the updated view. Now this 3D view would probably have a crop region here as well. That is the extent, the field of vision that we were manipulating before. Now you can actually change this dynamically in this view. to frame exactly what you want to see. Now obviously if you'd have neighbouring buildings it'd look a little bit better because you'd be able to see some context. Okay, so I've made this a little bit smaller and framed it, and it looked nice if you had trees. You can put a car in there if you like. Okay, so you can find all those things in the family libraries if you want to load some more components. Okay, so let's say we're happy with our view. Now we should be ready to render. So once you've got everything there laid out, and make sure that you have defined all your elements, your walls, your floors, everything properly so that it shows materials, you're ready to render. And the render tool is in the view tab, and it's in the graphics panel, and it's that button there that looks like a teapot. If you click on that, you'll get this rendering dialog box come up. And a couple of things here. Now first is the output settings, basically the size of your render when you finish rendering. Now this is at a particular dimension. Now if I change this crop region, you'll see that those dimensions will change dynamically. Okay, so that's the resolution of your drawing. Now you might want to fiddle around with that a little bit, so change the crop region, bring the camera closer so that you're not seeing too much. So once again you might have to go into the floor plan, then right click, show camera, and just bring that in closer, like so. Okay, now go back into the 3D view. I'm just going to bring out the rendering dialog box again so you can adjust this to suit. And you can just go about adjusting the framing of what you want to see, and keeping an eye on the resolution setting as well. Now I think you have to submit something that's 1200 by 800 in resolution. So depending on what you have, you might want to keep adjusting it until it's a particular resolution. Now that printer resolution is for printing, so just keep that in mind. If you're going to print, you might want to choose that. You have a number of choices in there, so you can change the resolution in there. At the moment I'm just going to use a screen because I want to save it to the project, but also I want to export as an image. Now of course this would depend very heavily on your screen resolution as well. My screen resolution is very low. If you have a slightly higher resolution, you'll find that this particular aspect would probably have a much higher setting here. I'm just going to leave my setting as is for the moment, and I trust that you'd be changing that to suit the submission. So just bear in mind that it's at least 1200 by 800 for your own submission. Okay, so let's say that this is what I want to render. The first thing you need to do is check the quality, and it's always good practice to do a draft render to see how it works. So if I click on the render button now, you'll probably see something like this in the corner. Mine will go ultra quick because this is only a draft setting. It looks quite crude, and you don't see any clarity. That's just for me to check on how things are framing within that view. You might want to go down here, have a play around with the background. So here you've got options for different sky backgrounds, but you've also got solid color too if you want a solid color. Okay, so you can choose a color in here if you want just a simple color. I'm going to leave it, actually I'm going to go down to the image background because I want to load an image, let's say of a city or an urban environment. This will allow you to load, let's go into there. Let's say I've got here, we've got a city view. Looks a little bit like this. If I, let's say, fit it to the width of the render, it looks a little bit like this. Okay, so I may be able to see just parts of it in the background. Load it up. Now if I press the render again, keeping it on the draft mode so that it goes very quickly so I can just test, you can see that parts of that will appear in the background. Of course, if I had a building right next to there, that would be obstructed, and so I'd just see little bits of it. Now you can keep customizing that image too. I'm going to customize it to the height, render it very quickly and see how it goes. Okay, so the height's actually changed slightly. So I strongly recommend you put some context there so you don't see this ugly edge here. Okay, now further down the line you can manipulate things like lighting. So there is artificial lighting as well. So the thing to remember is, especially if you're doing an internal render, is that you have to have artificial lighting components inside. So if you're doing an internal render and you choose, let's say, sun and artificial, Revit will be able to pick up the sun from the outside and generate it as shadows or whatever it is inside the internal space. But to get proper internal lighting, you have to put artificial lighting in there. And you can find all those lighting components in the family libraries. So you have to put lamps in, downlights, whatever lighting scheme that you need for that internal space. Otherwise you will get a very dark render. So keep that in mind. I'm just going to leave it as external for the moment. And of course in the sun setting you can play around with some other settings in here, including how high the sun is and where it is. You might want to specify on what level it lies as well. So there's a lot of flexibility here. And of course down here in the image we can save it to the project, and we can also export it as an image file. So when I press export, it allows me to export it as a JPEG, which is what you need to submit your file. So that's a quick rundown on some of the settings in this box. Now I'm just going to click on the show the model for a second and minimize this. So let's say you had trees there as well, and something to hide that edge. Okay, so a neighboring building or something, or just change your view. So it'd be nice to have a nice streetscape there where you've got another shop front there and another shop front there, and some trees. Okay, so once you're ready and you've done a couple of drafts, you're happy with the settings, then you might want to change the setting to the best setting there is. So it'll generate a really high quality render. Once you've done that, click render. And depending on your resolution, this might take a while, so you will need to wait and let it render. So you can see this on the screen. What it does is it runs through and does a draft render, and then it will probably run through again and do a more detailed one and more detailed one. So give it time. I'm just going to pause this and we'll come back when it's finished. Okay, so we're at the end of my render process here, so we'll just wait for that to finish, and as you can see the render is a little bit cleaner than the draft version, and the background has come through. Now you can just barely see the surface pattern of the brick here. Now this does show you how important materials are in the rendering process. So make sure you define your walls and all of your elements very carefully, choosing materials carefully so that it comes out in the render properly. You can also see the glazing of the curtain wall there as well. Okay, so once you've finished with your render and you're happy with it, save it to the project, but you also want to export it as well. So let's export it first, and I'm just going to export it as my project. Okay, as a JPEG, because that's the format that you've been asked to submit it as, and then save it to project as well. So I'm just going to call it Street View 1. That's fine. Okay, then close the rendering down. Now you can repeat that process for a number of views if you like, to make sure that um, you've generated a nice range there, and you can choose which one to submit. Now if you're willing, or if you're keen to actually put that rendered view on a sheet, you may need to create a new sheet first for, let's say, a cover. So I might create a new sheet here. So here it is down here, and I'm just going to call this one oops, 0, and it's just my project name. Okay, so you can name it whatever you like. Okay, so here it is, my project. If I double click that, go to it. So this could be a cover sheet, and in this cover sheet I can actually put in whatever I like. So I'm going to put in just my street view. Bring that in, click on it. And to bring in your rendering, you need to go down to the renderings, which is just past the section. Here we go, and here's the rendering I saved to the project. Drag that in as well. Notice that it's a lot smaller. That's because the resolution of my screen is very low and the resolution of the rendering is very small. So if you're doing the rendering in any of the lab computers, you'll find the resolution is a lot higher. So something like this would generate a really high resolution rendering, and this image would be a lot bigger. And so you can actually put in multiple rendered views in here if you like. You can also put in other information about the project, an introduction perhaps, or a number of schedules. That usually happens on the front page as well. Now, one thing I probably overlooked to show you in the previous tutorial was how you can bring in schedules. Now, you were introduced to schedules before with the windows and doors. Now, I trust you have been updating that information, or updating the fields that you want to show in the schedules. Now, to put a schedule into a sheet, just need to scroll down to the schedules. Here we go, and just select one that you want, let's say the room one, and drag it into the sheet. Okay, and you'll find that it brings in the room schedule as a table. You can do that for any one of them. So let's bring in the window one and the door one. Okay, so I didn't line that, but that's okay. And you can see that all that information is there. Now, if you happen to go in and change some of this, so let's get rid of the location and the finish. So I'll go into the fields and get rid of finish, remove. Anything else that I want to get rid of, let's get rid of manufacturer and frame material. Okay, so now there's not so many fields. If we go back into our sheet and you should be able to have a look at what's in there, and it should be less. So that should update automatically, so it wasn't as many fields there. I'm just going to align that. Okay, so if you want to bring in schedules into your sheet, that's how you do it. Very, very easy. But it does require you to keep a close eye on what is in these schedules and to maintain it. So bringing in fields that you want, taking fields out, making sure the values are there, and if there are no floor finish, make sure that information is there in the room or door or windows. And that's it on basic rendering. Now Revit can render to quite a high resolution, and it can render very photorealistic images depending on the settings. So let's go back into the 3D view for a second. Not that one. Let's go street view. Of course, it all depends on the settings. So if you are rendering to printed format and choose a 600 dpi, you can see that the resolution is huge. even 300 dpi. Okay, so keep that in mind. The bigger the resolution, the longer it's going to take, and it also depends on the materials in your model. And don't forget to export as a JPEG and save it to the project so you can put it on your sheets.